So I would like to introduce Jenny Lay-Flurrie to you. She graduated with a BMus in music in 1997. And I'm not going to say much more, Jenny, because I think over to you now.
Hi there. Good evening, folks. Thank you for joining sort of late into your evening on a Thursday. It's I'm actually in Seattle, so it's 10 a.m. here. So you'll excuse me while I'm still drinking coffee and tea. Hopefully you're not on the caffeine at this point, but whatever you're drinking, game on. I'm going to give a little bit of a whiz-bang tour of what I'm up to, what we're up to here, and give you a sort of a sniff into some of the things and priorities and how I went from a music degree to the job I have today. I really do encourage questions. I'm going to be watching the chat window a little bit while we're going through. So just chuck them in because I'd love to dig into those. Honestly, that's kind of the best part of these kind of forums is understanding what questions you've got. So let me dig in a little bit and give you some degree of how this arc comes together. So I began, I'm actually a Brummie. I was born near Birmingham. And then I move on really quickly from that. Are there any other Brummies maybe? Yes. All right, Emma's putting up her hand. My parents both teachers. I basically grew up with two head teachers as parents, which meant things were done in a very structured way in my house. You didn't say boo to them without consequence. My sister and I, my youngest sister, she was born with deafness. She is severely deaf. I was born with mild moderate deafness, or I wasn't born with mild moderate. I gained moderate deafness through measles in early childhood, somewhere between 3 and 5. And my deafness has declined very gradually as I've sort of descended into old age, which is now where I stand. I am now severely, profoundly deaf. I do not hear speech. And I use an ASL interpreter, American Sign Language, and she is on the call as well with me, Belle. I love the animals, keep them coming. And I use a mix of captioning and interpreting to understand my world. I went to classic school, as did my sister and I, we both did. And never, even though we were deaf in my house, my dad's kind of deaf. I had an uncle who was deaf. It was kind of a deaf thing. Coming out of the house where deafness was not the normal was very, very different. But we went to classic, normal, standard education. I found that I absolutely loved music. I was playing theme tunes to kids' TV programs as a small child. You guys are way too young to know this, but Heidi was a TV show, and that was probably one of the first theme tunes I learned to play on the recorder. And I learned to play the recorder so it actually sounded good, as opposed to the squeaky, horrible thing that most folks do. From music, how did I get into tech? And that's really a simple thing. I loved music. I loved my time in Sheffield. I used to work at the Duke of York or O'Neill's behind the bar, if that still exists, which was on the corner before the hill up to the music department. I loved working with people, loved the music side of things, but I was never going to make a full-time career that paid money out of music. So I got myself a job to pay the bill and to pay the rent. And that ended up being at the Daily Mirror in the IT department, which was kind of crazy at the time. The editor was Piers Morgan. So yeah, a lot of stories. We don't have time. But I also found that I love problem solving. And even though I hadn't really used a computer before, again, I'm very old, and it wasn't really a key focus in a music degree, I found that computing fed a different part of me. It was all problems that just needed solving. A journalist who couldn't file copy because something was wrong with the laptop, or something was wrong with Adobe, or something was wrong with Word. Absolutely loved it, and ended up getting more and more involved in IT. Cut a long story short, I went through a whole bunch of startups, ended up at T-Mobile, working across Europe. and then landed at Microsoft 15 years ago. I joined to work on Hotmail. Does anyone remember Hotmail? Yeah, okay. That's good. And again, was in my happy spot, although I very quickly realized that joining a technical company and not being honest about my deafness, because I would hide it quite well, and never really told people how deaf I was, wasn't a good thing, particularly in a company like this one where we talk all the time on forums like this, on multiple time zones with lots of different languages. I had to be honest because I couldn't hear speech. So I ended up joining the deaf group, lots of other groups, building the disability community of employees at Microsoft, chairing that, and then 5 years ago became the Chief Accessibility Officer, which is really what I do today, along with my family. My husband is a Microsoftie. Yes, it happens. It's one of those things. I cannot say anything more about that. It's just what it is. Good luck to you all as you all find your own adventures. And between us, we have 4 kids, a puppy, a golden retriever, and a cat, and 2 bunny rabbits. And it is insane. And I wouldn't change it for the world. So that's my gig. But let me give you some sense of what it is we actually do. So my sole focus now is nothing to do with Hotmail. It's to do with disability and accessibility. So my own disability essentially became my career. And what I look at for Microsoft is really catering to the range of disability. There's 1 billion+ people with disabilities. It ranges from what you can see to what you cannot. Most people think that disability is a wheelchair or a hearing aid or a cane. In fact, that's only 30% of disability, around that. Most of disability is invisible to the eye. You cannot see it. Mental health, autism, ADD, lupus, these are all disabilities. And my job is, along with an army of folks here, is to figure out how best we can provide technology, products, information, hiring practices, and just make sure that we really lean into the mission of Microsoft, which is to empower every person to achieve more. And the every is really important to us. So if you look at what the problem set that I've got, because I think with every area there's a problem set, and we got a big one. I've got 1 billion+. I've got disability can hit you at any point in life. So if you don't have one yet, you're probably coming my way. Good luck. It's okay. It's quite the cool gang. But that's just life, right? Disability hits through accident, through injury, through illness. It can happen when you least expect it. And it doesn't normally come in singles. You get multiples, right? So don't think that just because you have one that you won't acquire another one. Sorry, it's one of those gigs. It's correlated to age. It's going to come. It can be permanent. It can be temporary. It can also be something that's very situational. So if you just think about walking around, even right now, I've got a puppy who seemingly likes to be held all the time, particularly at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I'm walking around the house holding a puppy, trying to calm this gorgeous little thing down. That means I've got one arm that is not being used for anything other than puppy holding. That's a situational disability. I'm then reliant on one hand to do my gig. That's got nothing to do with the disability, but it presents the same situation as if I was missing an arm for that period of time, which makes this a design challenge. And then you think about the societal impact here. You've got 1 in 10, that only 1 in 10 have access to the products they need. That's a World Health Organization statistic. And the unemployment rate is double that for people with disabilities versus not, and it's getting worse. Some of the statistics around the pandemic aren't surprising, but they are horrible. There was a couple here in the States just a couple of weeks ago that showed that there was 1 million more people with disabilities here in the States that had been put on the unemployment line. 1 in 5 people with disabilities impacted with unemployment, as opposed to 1 in 7 without disabilities. So disproportional impact. And I'm seeing a lot of that with some of the reports coming out from the BBC that we're tracking as well. We have a problem, which is how do we empower people and how do we see this differently? Because disability is a talent pool. If I'm going to create great products in a company like Microsoft or any company that meet the needs of everyone out there, the best experts that we can hire are people with disabilities that bring their expertise. So whether it's mental health, autism, deafness, blindness, we want that talent. So how can we change the lens on disability and empower employers to be able to understand how best to do this? One place that we do go to is starting to understand the business case. So even while I'd say the disability community knows that we're all smart, sassy, amazing humans, we wanted to get some stats out there and research out there that really sort of put some numbers behind it. This was done by Accenture a couple of years ago with a charity called Disability In. And it really looked at companies that had hired people with disabilities and done a good job versus companies that had not, and saw a pretty huge difference in financial impact. So if you look at bottom line with any company and you look at their financial measures, there's a real difference when you have a company that's invested in this versus not. Really important data as we're pushing on companies to start opening up doors that have been closed to disability. And then just to give you a sense of what our journey's been. Our journey was started way before me. Microsoft is actually 45 years old, started in 1975 by Mr. Bill Gates and others, just sort of coming together to think about a PC in everyone's room, everyone's house. That was really the originating mission, which was nutty at the time. No one thought that was possible or realistic or needed. Oh, how things have changed. In that time, accessibility started to bubble. In fact, if you look at the history of accessibility, it's fascinating. We just hit here the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a really significant law that it really prevents discrimination of people with disabilities in the States. If you want to watch an amazing documentary that covers the history of it, there's one on Netflix called CRIP Camp, C-R-I-P Camp, that covers some of the journey of the advocates that helped to form the ADA. A lot of the ADA, which was then signed in 1990, was covering physical accessibility, how you get into a building, how you get in to a library or a court. And previous to that, ramps were not mandated, right? You just think about that. Ramps become part of the course for us now. Before 1990, it was optional. As we look at the 90s, it then started to move into the digital space. This is when digital was coming to the fore. So then you start seeing the need for us to start coalescing. What does it mean for us for Windows? And there was Windows before 95, by the way. For those that do have historical mindsets, it's worth looking into the history of what happened with Windows. But the 90s is when employees with disabilities started coalescing. That's when we started building features. There's a feature called Sticky Keys, which is the first accessible feature that I've been able to find. That is an annoying little pop-up that you may have seen if you're using PCs, which are superior things. We fixed that, but it was an essential thing that if you hit it, it would be a great shortcut if you had mobility challenges. That was one of our first features. Fast forward, we've since then really taken the bull by the horns and gone for it in a much bigger way. So we have a dedicated support environment. Just to give you one case study, that's called the Disability Answer Desk, or DAD is how we refer it. I have no mum, but I have a dad. That has now taken 1 million calls from customers with disabilities. It's dedicated, mostly staffed by people with disabilities, to help folks understand how to use technology. One pilot started with 5 people back 7 years ago. And And now it's sort of grown into a pretty enormous beast. I took this role 5 years ago with a new remit to bring together people with disabilities and our efforts to grow accessibility at Microsoft. And so let me give you a sense of what we've done. If you take accessibility as making sure that all of your nerdery works well for people with disabilities, your website, your documents, anything and everything, your hiring processes, your marketing campaigns, it's making sure that things like there's captions on your videos, there's audio descriptions so the blind can hear it, there's sign language, that if you're using a screen reader, which is what the blind uses, it reads what's on your screen. So instead of it being a visual environment, it also becomes an audio environment. One of the problems with accessibility within any company is that it hasn't really been tackled as part of just this is what you have to do. So the first thing we did was at Microsoft 5 years ago is really start to establish what was the model of how we were going to put accessibility into the company. We built a maturity model. I'm sure you've seen maturity models before. There's lots of them out there. We leveraged two. One was from Carnegie Mellon. The other was from a accessibility consulting firm, and we use those as a basis for our own. It's got 5 levels to it. We use it every year to assess how mature we are. And we look at every single part of the company and what's happening in every single part of the company. And that goes and starts with people. People is one of the most important elements to think about. And I would say this is where I see companies, as included, sometimes having the door open for people with disabilities and sometimes having it firmly shut. There was a significant job posted last week by one of the big tech companies, which is a really important job. It was for accessibility. And with it came, we posted this job, but the website to apply for the job, it's not accessible. So if you're interested in the job, please send me an email. What? Let me just trickle through what that means. That means that you've got an important job to build accessible stuff, but the website that has all of the careers information on it, a blind person and other people using assistive technology cannot leverage or use. You cannot apply for that job using the standard environment. No, quite simply no. That is a case of a non-mature environment. Because once you do that, you're giving a message. Why would a blind person ever apply for a job in a company to anything if they cannot access it at the same level as anyone else? We need that equality of what we do. If somebody sends me a video to review, but sends it to me as a deaf person without captioning, I send it back saying, thank you, let me know when you're ready. I'll review it when you give it to me in the right way. I demand and deserve as a person with disability to be able to access things the same way as anyone else. That is a classic case of door closed. So what we do is really methodically help to drive maturity in our own environment. And then we publish this so that other companies can learn from what we do and hopefully make it better. One program that we did do a lot on was our autism program. We started this a few years ago. One of my kids, in fact, 2 of my kids have autism, and we saw just amazing talent, not intellectually impacting, but just socially awkward in a lot of situations, which meant the interview process would suck. And in fact, if you look at autism as one pivot, incredibly talented individuals with very analytical brains, really achieving an amazing amount in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but was failing and was joining really in an underemployment situation because the interview was problematic. If you ask an individual, you ask my kiddo, how was your day? You would get a very simple answer, good or bad, depending on what the day was. If you ask somebody, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You would get very, very simple answers. Those aren't going to get you through in a standard interview process. So we ditched the interview, and instead we have an academy for candidates with autism, with autistic folk, and we spend a week understanding their skills. We bring in all the hiring managers, we look and assess, and then we make offers based on what we see. That's where we're opening the door. We're getting and eliminating the part of the process that is inhibiting inclusion. We're making it available to everyone so that we can see their mad skills. And trust me, we found some amazing talent. Over 100 folks that are now working across 12 divisions. Xbox, everyone wants to work in Xbox, by the way. It's a really cool place. I get it. Windows, Office, my team, all over the company. And it's just talent that's infusing expertise into us. We benefit the most, bluntly. But we did it by just opening the door, right? Creative thinking about the process. Let's just talk a minute about these times and give you a couple of examples here. And I think the overall mantra is that accessibility was important before, but it's even more important now. COVID and the pandemic. I spent quite a bit traveling. My last trip, though, was in February. I came back from Ottawa and landed. And the following week, we were given the work from home mandate here in Seattle. We were the first hotspot here in the States. That was before the UK lockdown. I think about 3 weeks earlier than you guys. But I'll tell you that normally me and Belle, who's my interpreter, sit 6 feet away from one another, and we're physically in the same room as one another all the time because sign language is that way. Right, I've got to see her full body in order to understand what's being said. We had to flip and change our world pretty much overnight, and that is the same for everyone. It's a learning process, and what it's meant is that we've become more and more and more dependent. We had to figure out how to use technology in a different way. We had to figure out how to do sign language interpretation over this forum. We had to figure out how to get the right mix for the meetings that I'm in. I'm normally in about 8 to 10 hours of meetings on a given day. How do you do that and sustain while you're also educating supposed children and caring for other furry animals and everything else, right? What we saw was that reflected from our customers. We had about 200 to 300% increase in call volumes to our disability support desk. We started publishing webinars, environments, getting all that information out. We saw captioning increase by over 30 times on Teams as people turned to technology to assist in the absence of physical accommodations like sign language or captioners. We saw Immersive Reader grow over 500%. Immersive Reader is a great thing in Word and our browser that allows folks with dyslexia to read things differently. And we saw volumes just increase. And ultimately, we ended up posting a whole bunch of stuff because what we realized is that people need it, but don't know where stuff is. And so we put a whole bunch of blogs out there on how do you do an accessible event that is inclusive to everyone. What can we learn from our own employees? There are some great articles in here from some of our employees with mental health, who are deaf, blind. What are their work practices to work more effectively? Gaming, we all turn to gaming. I am addicted to Animal Crossing. I'm also addicted clearly to the Xbox. In fact, all of us are addicted to gaming. It's a great respite, particularly for folks with disabilities. How do you get going? Because we've got some amazing stuff there. And of course, tips for students. And then we started to put out sort of real hints and tips in terms of how can you use some key things. So here are some of the things that we found to be really important that actually can give you a little bit more battery power during the day. Stuff like how can you change your pointer and how can you change your font? Really quickly, I have a big, bright, shiny pointer. Not because I'm blind or not because I'm low vision, but because it's easier for me to see. And if I'm using less of my eyes, that gives me more ability to use my eyes for other stuff. So there's quick things. These are just built into Windows. How how can you also, this is Immersive Reader, turn on Immersive Reader, not because I'm a dyslexic, but because, which is 5% of the population, but because if I turn on Immersive Reader, which changes the colors, changes the spacing, makes it easier to read words. I have to read a lot of dense documents. I'd be very curious if you do too. Things that are really easy to read sometimes, not at all. But if I turn this on, it's easier to read it, right? Accessibility doesn't just benefit cool people with disabilities, it benefits everyone. And then also, how can I make sure that all of my stuff is accessible? If you have a website that you've built, a SharePoint, anything you've built, if you don't know if it's accessible, it's not. And people with disabilities need you to make sure it's good. And so we put all of these tools. This is a quick download that you pop into Chrome or Edge, and it gives you a quick sense of how good is your website. It actually walks you through and simulates the experience of someone who's blind. And if you hit tab, it walks you through what they would see effectively or hear in this instance. So it shows you, how you are. Because you can create all the good products in the world, but if people don't know about it, they're not going to be able to use it. And then we got a wave of, hey, this stuff, normally you get a document, and if you can't see it and you can't get through it, you can lean on somebody else next to you to give you, hey, can you give me your eyes for a minute? Can't do that with a pandemic. We're all isolated. So this is accessibility checker that's just built into Word. It's right next to spell check. If you haven't used it, I'm going to nudge you all to use it next time. But basically, this checks your document to make sure that it's inclusive. And then I had well, why should I do that? I don't have anyone with a disability in my class, in my team. I'm like, how do you know that? Disability is an invisible beast. If you don't know if there's somebody in your environment that has a disability, you don't know. That's not to say there's no one there. And the likelihood is that there is. 1 in 5 has a disability, right? So this just checks your document, puts in something really important, which is called alternative text. So if you have a picture, and we all have pictures, and you're doing this on Twitter, you're doing it on Instagram, you're doing it in Word, you're doing it on everything, go and find the setting for alternative text and make sure that you write in what that picture is. If you don't put a description in that picture, a blind person will see it as blank, right? Empower people with the same access to information that you have. It's just a setting. Find it in accessibility in any environment that you're in. And then we've also been really focused on what can we do for the future. This is one project that we have in the UK coming out of Microsoft Cambridge by Cecily, who is a brilliant researcher. And she's working on how we can use AI, AR to visualize an environment for someone who's blind. So if you put the HoloLens on, which is a really cool device that just sits over your eyes, and you imagine sitting at a Christmas dinner table, and people are coming in with dishes and the roast parsnips, which are always burnt. And there's lots of people coming in with drinks and all that sort of loveliness. Imagine being blind and trying to track who's at the table, what their expression is, where they're moving to and from, who am I speaking to. AI and AR can actually tell you who is around the table, what their expression is, give an estimate of age, not always accurate, but an estimate. It always thinks I'm significantly younger than I am, and I have to educate it every time. And it can give you that sense of information. So instead of directing your comments to whoever, in fact, a lot of kids often have their heads down on the table when they're blind because they don't know who they're speaking to. It can change your understanding of social dynamics. Technology like this is really important for us to be focusing on, as is technology on mental health. And I think this is going to be one of the next frontiers, is how can you leverage AI, which is artificial intelligence? How can you leverage this to give you more understanding about your day, what's driving you nuts, who are you going to have a hard time with today, when are you going to sort of invest a little bit in breaks and self-care so that you can sustain, why is your battery power being used so much by what you've got scheduled. Just smarter. We've already got some of this tooling in my analytics, which is part of the Office, overall the Microsoft 365 suite. It tells me every day kind of how much time I've been using on emails, on meetings, how much focus time I've had, how much time away I've had, which I'm terrible at. It gives me that intelligence to empower me to make better decisions for myself. 83% of us will experience mental health at some point in our lifetime. It's incredibly important. I think one of the most important areas that we can invest in going further. And I think that's really one of the people ask me, what's the future with accessibility? AI is kind of it. There's a lot more, right? There's robotics, there's the VR and what you can do with virtual reality. There's so much that gets really exciting. Ultimately, technology can empower independence. It can empower a new bar of understanding of the world around you. And if you have fruity devices, I encourage you to download an app called Seeing AI. It's a free app in the Apple Store that was really our first foray into what could be done. It was done by an amazing hack team, including several blind folks, employees, to think about how they could take AI to imagine the world around them. You take a picture and it will tell you what it is. That could be the color of your sweater. That could be, your jumper. I've been in America too long. It can tell you the barcode from a barcode what something is. It can give you an estimate of who a person is. And just think about how empowering that information is if you don't see the world. Right? So incredible. And you can play with it. It's really fun. It's a nice game to play, actually. Is to take someone's picture and show them what artificial intelligence thinks. Do not hurt me if the results are bad. Stuff that you can do. There is a badge that you can get. There is some training that you can get. This is actually training that Microsoft employees are asked to take, and we've just published it externally. I go have fun. These are a lot of the things that I've talked about and more that give you a lot of the fundamentals, I would say, for disability and accessibility. And I really encourage you to do that. But most of all, if you think about my journey from music to nerdery, it's really about leaning into who we are all as humans, seeing disability as a strength. I went from hiding it to now leading it, and figuring out how we can partner better and solve and bring all those ideas together so that we can create a different future. If I've got any vision for the future, it's that we do change our unemployment rate. It's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. This year is it's a chunk of this year. It's just, my gosh, none of us expected this. But I do think that technology can have that impact. I never in a million years dreamed that I would be doing what I'm doing today. But it is the best place I could have ever landed. So let me leave it there. And please, I'm going to stop. You're going to chuck some questions in, I hope. Please don't leave me hanging and do not be shy, because I am not. And we can get to some questions, Charlotte.
Wow, Jenny, I think I speak for everyone that this was really inspirational. Some great nuggets of what Microsoft has been doing over the years to really make sure that, people with disabilities have more access. I think that's just, I was especially struck with, how you have tackled the recruitment process for people with autism. I didn't know this. I'm absolutely blown away by this. And I'm sure that these guys will have lots of questions. But like I said, let's jump into some of the questions that they asked beforehand, and then we'll pick up some of the questions in the chat. So Jennifer Salem, can I invite you to ask your question on being resilient?
Oh, sorry. Hi. Thank you for that. It was a really interesting presentation. So the question that I have for you is, have you got any advice for being resilient when faced with workplace barriers that may not affect your peers?
Yeah, workplace is a really important one. I think, and I'm seeing that sort of thematically come up in some of the questions as well. I think the best advice I can give is to first see disability as a part of being human. A lot of people with disability, myself included, I hid it for years. I wasn't honest about it. When I reached ceilings, which I did a few times, and eventually had to make the decision to reach out or not, I was shocked by the positive response that I got. And I know I'm lucky in that. Not everyone gets that. But the smart thing that I did do is that I did power myself up with a lot of information on my rights, on how it should go, on great advisors who told me the way to tackle things, and some great mentors. And I was very lucky to have a manager that kind of looked at me and said, okay, what do we do? And I ended up getting on to the government scheme, which ended up doing an assessment on my hearing, assessment on my workplace. And I wouldn't be here today without it. Access to work was the scheme back then. I think I cannot say that it's easygoing though. There will always be ceilings. I get them today. Things where I'm asked to do stuff that I know I'm not going to be successful at. I am deceptively deaf because my speech is so good. And so people think I'm able to do stuff that I'm physically not. And I think that's where you have to learn to be your own best self-advocate, explain clearly and rationally why, but get creative in terms of how you can work around stuff, because it is amazing what you can do. Ask for help was probably the biggest thing, and I suck at that, but I'm working on it, because asking for help is actually the biggest sign of strength. And then help to make the culture and the workplace around you better, pay it forward. So I now do I invest a lot of my time in mentoring, both in work and out of work, helping others in different situations. But know your rights, and see disability just as part of who you are, whether that's mental health, physical, disease, whatever it may be. We're all going to have stuff at some point in our life, and don't tolerate badness. Do educate. I think education is often the key. People don't know what to do. And so education is paramount. So a lot there, but just see it as good. It's a skill set that companies want and need. All of us are looking to hire talent with disabilities at this time. So be open about it. Ask for what you need to be successful. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a good answer. I hope you don't mind. I've got one more question, if that's okay, Charlotte.
Yeah, of course, Jennifer.
I was wondering, how do you reckon employers can avoid writing biases into AI? Because I know that if you don't have all the right people working on a piece of technology, how would you prevent certain biases coming forward when you're trying to remove those in accessibility?
The two conversations go together. It's a very hot topic here and across a number of different areas, not just disability, of course. And I think it's, in many ways, there's a lot of complexity to the approach. But at the core, if you empower people to bring themselves in, including their disability, you will then have the expertise that you need to help make sure that you have a grounded, diverse, inclusive approach to your technology, particularly needed for AI, but not exclusive to AI. So as we look at different components of AI, whether that's facial recognition, voice recognition, and everything else, it is about making sure that you build in the right diversity into your thinking, the right approach. And I tend to think about it as rings. You're going to get stuff right with a core set of folks, but then you need to get it out to your first ring, get their feedback, and then broaden it. Because the thing with disability is that even, my version of deafness is very different to another person's. Lived experience is going to be different for every single human. So you've got to, over time, span it out and have that feedback loop that comes right back in, and the learning that then course corrects it very quickly. So will that prevent bias? I can't say that it's prevention, it's a learned. I mean, AI is about learning how to do this right and taking that learning back into the machine. So it is a reiterative process.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. Christopher Unsworth, can I invite you to ask your question on Jenny's Proudest Achievement?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, it just took a bit to load up then. Yeah, so thank you for sort of taking the time to speak to us. So my question was, it seems like you've been able to do a lot of work while at Microsoft, but what would you say is your proudest achievement and the thing that you're most proud of that you've achieved to date?
Depends. I mean, kids kind of, have to hit that. And seeing them grow up, I think, is probably the biggest gift that they could ever be. But in terms of like work accomplishments, I'm still, it's funny, I'm fiercely proud of being able to work behind the bar for 6 years, which I did. Ironically, I worked for BMus all through uni and loved it. It was some of my happiest times. Work accomplishments, though, probably a couple of things. I think really building the disability community here at Microsoft has been, it sounds weird, I don't want to be an Oscar winner speech, but it's a real like honor to bring together. It's now 22 groups across Microsoft. I'm now one of the sponsors of it, as opposed to the chair of it. And just seeing how that's grown around the world. It's got regional chapters to it. And some of the new groups, whereas like PTS and depression, anxiety, that they are the invisible category that I'm so passionate about. So just seeing how that little seed going back to 2006, 2007 has now blossomed. And I've got people telling me that they're yelling at me every day, Jenny, this is wrong. And I'm like, great. I'm like, why are you happy about me moaning at you? I'm like, because that's the whole purpose for this. If I'm going to make Microsoft better with the army of people, I've got to have that tension of use versus pragmatism. It's kind of, I need that feedback coming in. I think the other one was that I received an award from the White House in 2014, so not the Trump era, the previous era, and that was an incredible honor. I was recognized as a champion of change, and that was just ridiculous, and pretty humbling to receive that. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Stephanie Taverner, can I invite you to ask your question, please?
Yeah, of course. So mine's about sort of accessibility in the workplace is kind of often termed as under sort of the diversity and inclusion umbrella. Sort of your role as Chief Accessibility Officer is relatively new, sort of C-level position. Do you believe like most multinational corporations will have a CAO role in the next 10, 15 years? Or is that just because Microsoft have championed this sort of in the technology space as well?
That's a great question. So yes, there's kind of two parts to it, kind of how do we see my kind of role spreading and where does it sit? My role doesn't sit in HR. My role does sit in our corporate external legal affairs division, which is a small, we're about 150,000 employees around the world. Our division's fairly small. It's only about 1,500 employees. But my peers, who I was just chatting with, run sustainability, responsible AI, airband, rural access to connectivity, privacy, security, online safety. So we're all in the societal push is where I sit, which is where accessibility for Microsoft is best placed. I partner a lot with HR, clearly, but we're positioned slightly different. And I do think the recommendation I give to any company is to really look at your company and figure out the right, best empowered place. HR is one element that I look at. In fact, most of my time is spent with product teams. So you have to balance it, which is why we put it where it is. And then in terms of the role, I am the second CAO for Microsoft. There was one before me. There are plenty of other leaders. If you know, there's a gang of us. We're spreading across. So I love that two of the most awesome humans that I get to work with every day is my peer at Apple and my peer at Google, who are both other female nerds. We have some of the best conversations. Is there a need for a lot more? Yes. Not all of them, by the way, have the fancy title, but they are leading accessibility. And that's what I want to see, regardless of title, is people who are driving this forward, because accessibility isn't a mature engineering discipline. If you don't have that degree of focus, you're quite simply not going to be producing accessible, inclusive stuff. And so I want to see more leadership from companies. So yeah, 10 years from now, game on. That would be a good goal. I am seeing it trending in the right way, but there's definitely more to be had.
Great. I think this segues quite nicely into the next question, Jenny. You and Barry, can I invite you, please?
Yeah. Hiya. Thanks for that, Jenny. That was really interesting. There's some really cool tools that I actually didn't realize were part of Microsoft Windows. So my question was on how do you ensure that your work and accessibility reaches all workers across all levels of the organization? Because I imagine when you get down to the people that make the Xbox or assemble the Xbox, there's maybe some more challenges with those sorts of workers.
Yeah, no. So it's a very interesting question. I think it's a challenge, right? If you think about the challenge that I have, it's I've got to get into the hearts and minds of 150,000 softies, right? And on every given day, there are moments of brilliance and moments of that we're managing. I think that would be the same for any role, right? You've got to tackle it. The general theory and approach is tops down and bottoms up. So tops down, I've got a CEO who is all over it. He's a father of a kid with disabilities, kids with disabilities. And he was actually the sponsor of the disability employee group when I was chair of it before he became CEO. So that spread into his leadership team and has spread beyond that. So you've got that tops down, so it's a priority. It's talked about. You'll see it in all of our website and our messaging. And, if you actually look on our website, microsoft.com/accessibility, you'll find all of these guys talking at all of our events about accessibility. Tops down. People need to hear it from leadership. And then bottoms up. That's making sure that everyone is speaking up, and that feedback has a great loop into product, but also that you're setting the clear standards of what has to be achieved. You're running it like a business. You're managing and measuring it. You're giving people feedback in the right areas, and you're providing a lot of resources to educate people. Now, does that solve it, with a magic wand? No. Is that quick? No. Culture change takes time. It takes years. And technology moves really fast. So even though you could feel as though you're there one day, a new piece of wizardry comes along, you're like, oh my gosh, that's just changed how I think about accessibility. What do we do now? How do we think about mental health and accessibility? What are the standards there that we should be adopting? This revolutionizes every 6 months to a year. And so you've got to keep up with that, and people move around. So you may have it sussed one day, and then you've got a new person on Wednesday. And so, yeah, it's a constant thing. But again, it's the ecosystem. It's not about me. It's not about my team. It's actually more important about how it's woven and webbed into every team and division. And then you keep an eye on, and you track and shift as you need to. So yeah, really easy, that one. Really easy.
Good stuff.
Mohammed Salim, could you ask your question about mental health? Because I'm sure we would all love to hear a little bit more about that.
Right. Thanks, Jenny. There were some amazing insights, particularly coming through Microsoft. So my question is, we see mental health being talked about a lot over LinkedIn as well. But this challenge, there are lots of people who don't want to disclose it to their employer, just like you probably didn't do until a long time. So how can we sort of create a culture where more people can, declare it, and then maybe also get onto using technology to get through with the challenges that they face?
Yeah, it's so the general, don't do what I did is the general rule here. I do think that mental health is a evolving. It's, if I look at the maturity of disability, I think our understanding of mental health and our social understanding and the stereotypes of mental health are fast evolving right now and being accelerated by the pandemic, which is, again, having another awful disproportional impact on mental health. I think we all know that at a level. But when we think about mental illness, yes, it becomes far more profound. But again, if you recognize mental health as one element of the disability spectrum, it's recognized by the World Health Organization as a disability. And if you take that as read, why aren't we having the right conversations with people around us? We should be. And it takes it's kind of the foot into the, should I do this or not? But I would encourage you to find the safe person and to take some risks. Anyone, by the way, I'd say that take the risk. It is terrifying. I did it with something that's pretty well known, but it was still terrifying because it's personal. Right? It's about you as a human, and you're sharing something that's deeply personal and invisible. Most around you will not know if you have a mental health condition. So it is finding the right environment, but taking that leap. And I think over time, when you see leadership, the royal family being a couple that are fiercely leading this, and I love that. And people talking openly about mental health and those case studies and role models coming out, that's important. Because I do think this, the stats tell me it's going to impact most of us, right? Why aren't we talking more about it? We should be. So you know that not only would you be advocating for self, you'd be advocating for change in the lens of mental health more broadly. And so, yes, it's a tough one, and I get it, but I would encourage anyone to have that conversation. Do not do what I did.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I think Laura Macaulay, can you ask your question? I think this is going to be a very interesting one.
Hiya. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you because I thought it was a really interesting presentation, and I learned loads that I didn't know before. I was just interested in how accessibility can be made accessible for all. So, for example, there's some people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who might not have access to expensive technology and AI. So how can these groups still be included?
It's very top of mind because one of the other community conversations is the additional cost of being disabled, and whether that's physical devices. Wheelchairs are not cheap. Hearing aids, horribly expensive. My hearing aids were $6,000 a piece here in the States. And they're purple and really cool, but that wasn't why they cost that much. So there is a cost impact. And I think from our perspective, a lot of what we do, everything I showed you is just woven into product. So it's not an additional cost. Or we post, like the Seeing AI app that I mentioned is free and in the App Store. So everything we do have that in mind, right? How can we make sure that this is affordable? Now, that's not to say that solves this, because it doesn't. I think if I think about, us as a global society and the developing world, there's an enormous wealth of opportunity for us to, the environments where there isn't this technology in people's hands, let alone being able to download an app on it. That's the stuff that I think, stuff keeps me up at night. That's definitely on my list. And there's a lot that keeps me up at night, and not just the puppy. So it's definitely something where I feel like we need to invest more. I will say that a lot of the technology that is out there, like you just said, people do not know what is in the boxes they may already have. So I think the other component is in the same way as I literally ran through 5 things really fast. How many of those did you guys know about? Right, I'm seeing shaking of heads. That's my problem, is even though, you know, there's stuff that I can do to get technology into people's hands, but even when they have it, do they know how to use it and know the richness that is in the devices that you may already have? And so I think it's multi-layered. And I think awareness and ease of use and ease of access is as important, if not more important in some ways, to really grow the use. And that comes back to that one statistic. How do we change it from 1 in 10 having the access to accessible technology they need? We've got to change that. And I think it's multi-pronged. And keeping the values really clear on cost and affordability and access as we go through. It's a great question. Yeah.
Jenny, in the interest of time, I'm going to squeeze one more question in, and then we'll do a quick screenshot and give you a big round of applause. But before we go on to that, let me go on to the next, the last question. So Liana Burrell, can you please ask your question?
Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for coming. I've literally learned so much. It's been very insightful. My question is, how do you think the educational system can improve in creating a better learning environment in the classroom for individuals who have a disability?
Yeah, this one I'm pretty passionate about, because I mean, I come from a lineage of teachers, and now I'm the teacher for, well, I'm a terrible teacher for my daughter who's starting virtual school. We're going to be virtual again here for the autumn. We're still in pretty lockdown situation here. And again, one of the classic problems here is that there is a wealth of tools available, but not folks don't know the wealth that there is at their fingertips. So one of the areas, the blogs that I highlighted, was really putting some of the details of what you can use right there. And I think it depends on the age of kid. If I go back to uni layer, if I had some of the technology that is now available when I was at uni, whether it's doing the music degree or my MBA and all that sort of stuff that followed, it would have changed my world. Because captioning was not available back then, not like this. In fact, what I had in my music degree is I had a mini disc. I don't know if you guys even know what those are. You're so young and gorgeous. Which was this little device that would record the lectures. I didn't have many. I was doing a music degree, but recorded my lectures, which would then get transcribed by one of my college mates. And so that's how I consumed university. It was painful. I would sit in the lectures, not knowing what's being said, and just like, oh, yeah, it would take me at least double, if not triple the time, right? You look at this is Google Meet, Microsoft Teams is the same. We have captioning right here. I've got access to my interpreter right there. I've got a transcript in Teams that I can just instantly download and get. It's being transcribed as the meeting's going forward. That transcript can be searchable, so I can get to the bit that I want. Oh my gosh, that completely revolutionizes what can happen in the classroom. But how many know about that? Do educators know about it? Do kids know about it? Then I look at dyslexia with Immersive Reader, which has got about 20 million monthly active users, but 20 million? It should be 200 million, if not a lot more. You know, that revolutionizes things. So I think there's a lot more technology to create, right? And I don't want to say that the mix is golden. It's not. And I would say we've learned, my gosh, my team has logged over 500 bugs in the last sort of period of time, and feature requests, things that we want to see. But technology today and how that can impact the classroom, it's a whole new level of independence. I want kids to be able to sit next to their peers and consume the content however they want and need, and still interact with their peers. And while my kid who's in special ed will be pulled out for 50% of her education, because that's the right thing for her, other kids, technology could power them to stay in the classroom, right? And just have their screen up, presented the way that it should be. That's revolutionary, right? So yeah, the job we have now is continuing to create, making sure people know what's there and using it, and not being fearful of it. It's good. And so, yeah, it's a really, really important one. And if you have ideas, bring it on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny. You certainly already saved our team some time, because we were actually talking about this in the office today. How are we going to make sure everything's transcribed? So knowing that this is available to us, we will be using this instantly.
I don't know if you can Google Meet. You'll have to check on that one. I don't know. Google is, this one's good. The captions are good. You'll have to check on the transcript, but I know you will.
I'm sure that there will be some other software available that we will be able to use, but we'll definitely be checking this out. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been incredibly inspirational having you here, and thank you for sharing all your insights into your personal story, insights into Microsoft, which you've heard from our graduates already. They've learned loads. So have I. There's loads of new things that I didn't know about. So it's been an absolute privilege having you here.